hated the day. The day was a miserable day. I mean, it was a...
Really? I thought...
Well, was it? Well, I can tell you now, it was the worst royal engagement I ever did. You know, I thought to myself, you know, this is all showbiz rubbish. You know, the whole thing was just stage managed to suit them. Worst royal wedding I ever did. He was angry, and I felt, you know, we were punished for that. To offend our queen, like he did in that book, you know, it really upset the king. And you know, I don't think he could easily forgive that. And I imagine the king's had strong words with him over it.
Royal photographer Arthur Edwards just shattered the fairy tale. After decades behind the camera at royal events, he's now exposing Meghan and Harry's wedding as the worst royal wedding he's ever witnessed. Forget the polished TV coverage. Behind the scenes, it was chaos, humiliation, and pure Hollywood fakery. And here's the kicker. The truth Arthur reveals doesn't just ruin the fairy tale. It changes everything we thought we knew about Meghan and Harry's big day.
The photographers they engaged for the job was 5 feet away. You know, it was just hopeless. And then the carriage shot, when they went past me in the carriage, they looked the other way. So for me, it was a disaster. You know, and then Oprah Winfrey had met them once. She was a guest. The Clooneys, you know, the guests. I mean, never met them before, but they were the guests. And you know, I thought to myself, you know, this is all showbiz rubbish. You know,
Did you ever get a sense then that they wanted out, that they wanted a California life, that they wanted showbiz, that they weren't interested? If they weren't interested in making people feel welcome at the wedding, you just think...
When the news first broke that Prince Harry was marrying Meghan Markle, the public was thrilled. The media called it the wedding of the century, and millions tuned in expecting a fairy tale. But according to royal photographer Arthur Edwards, who has covered every major royal event for decades, the truth couldn't have been further from that image. He flat out called it the worst royal wedding he's ever witnessed. Think about that. This man photographed Charles and Diana, William and Kate, and countless others. Yet it was Meghan and Harry's day that he says stood out for all the wrong reasons. Edwards admitted that from the very start, it felt staged, soulless, and completely fake. He described it as all showbiz rubbish. Instead of seeing a heartfelt celebration of love, he saw a carefully choreographed performance, designed for cameras and celebrity buzz. The insiders weren't watching a royal wedding, they were watching a press stunt. And that's a brutal statement coming from a man who's literally made a career capturing these moments.
The guest list, beyond the lone family member she invited, was simply inviting celebrities who were total strangers to her. I could see, especially with a wedding of this scale, inviting a handful of people who you do not know, but certainly not to this extent. There were a huge amount of guests who she had never met. Some people didn't even come. Like, for example, Reese Witherspoon said, "Why would I go? I don't even know them."
One of the biggest red flags that day was the guest list. Usually, royal weddings bring together family, lifelong friends, and respected figures who've stood alongside the couple for years. But Meghan's guest list, it looked more like the seating chart at the Oscars. Oprah Winfrey, George and Amal Clooney, Serena Williams, Elton John, you name it, they were there. The problem? Meghan barely knew most of them. Arthur Edwards revealed that Oprah had only met Meghan once and was only there because she was invited as a guest of the Clooneys. That's not exactly what you'd call a deep friendship. It felt like Meghan was more interested in surrounding herself with A-listers than actual loved ones. Even Hollywood itself saw through it. Reese Witherspoon reportedly turned down the invite with a savage line. "Why would I go? I don't even know them." Ouch. That's basically Reese saying, "Sorry, Meghan, I don't do clout chasing." For the royals, this looked bizarre. The monarchy is supposed to be about tradition, stability, and family roots. Instead, Meghan filled the pews with celebrities she had just met, or in some cases, never even met before. Imagine inviting someone to your wedding who you've exchanged maybe 3 texts with. It made the entire event feel less like a royal celebration and more like Meghan's personal PR party. Harry, of course, played along, but it gave the impression that the day wasn't about 2 people in love. It was about making a Hollywood-style splash. And let's be honest, can you picture Meghan walking down the aisle and thinking about her grandmother's advice? Or was she imagining the People magazine headlines the next morning? Even fans joked at the time that it felt like a networking event in a church. Meghan might have been the bride, but to many watching closely, she looked more like the host of her own Hollywood mixer.
Harry was angry with us, really, because some of the things that have been said about Meghan, and quite rightly, some of the things that were said about Meghan during the engagement were pretty harsh. I want to sort of mention them now, but some of them were pretty unfair as well. And so he was angry, and I felt, we were punished for that. And in fact, I never got one picture in the paper published from that day.
Now, if you thought the guest list was strange, wait until you hear what it was like actually sitting at the event. According to Arthur Edwards, the whole thing was closer to a survival challenge than a royal wedding. Guests were crammed into Windsor Castle, forced to sit in blazing heat with no shade. Imagine being dressed in heavy royal outfits, hats and suits designed for winter. While the sun scorched down like a spotlight, Edwards described it as unbearable. Celebrities in their designer clothes were desperately fanning themselves with the official wedding programs just to avoid passing out. So much for royal elegance. It looked glamorous on TV, but in reality, people were sweating through their clothes, wishing they were anywhere else. And the food? Even worse. Guests expected a royal feast, maybe something that reflected centuries of tradition. Instead, they got a handful of canapes, so small they could fit on a cracker. Edwards said the food was a complete joke. Tiny finger snacks that left people starving. Imagine being invited to the wedding of the century, only to leave hungry enough to stop at McDonald's on the way home. Some guests even muttered that they'd have been better off staying home. It wasn't the kind of luxury people dreamed of. It was a mess. Heat stroke, hunger and humiliation. Arthur wasn't exaggerating when he said this day was the opposite of magical.
I think, I've done some really lovely royal weddings. I did both King Charles's weddings. I did William's wedding, I did Andrew's wedding, I did Sophie and Edward. They were lovely occasions. But that today, I couldn't get out of Windsor quick enough. I promise you that.
The worst royal wedding.
As if the heat and lack of food weren't enough, the seating arrangements pushed things from bad to downright insulting. Royal weddings are supposed to be steeped in tradition, with decades of hierarchy dictating who sits where. But at Meghan and Harry's wedding, that rulebook was thrown out the window. Edwards revealed that high-ranking royals, people who had dedicated their lives to the crown, were shoved into the back rows, while minor royals got the best seats in the house. Can you imagine? Veterans of the monarchy treated like extras, while less important figures sat in prime view. Arthur himself had such a poor seat that he couldn't even see the couple clearly. He joked it was like watching the ceremony through a GPS app, completely blocked and frustrating. This wasn't just sloppy planning. It was a direct slap in the face to royal tradition. It sent a loud, clear message. This day wasn't about respecting the institution. It was about Meghan and Harry rewriting the rules for their own spotlight. And here's the irony. Meghan's side of the church was stacked with celebrities she barely knew, while the Queen's own family members were pushed aside. It made the entire event feel upside down. Guests who had served the monarchy for decades were sidelined, while people who had just learned how to spell Windsor got front-row treatment. The backlash among insiders was intense. It wasn't just disrespectful, it was humiliating. Arthur's description painted a picture of chaos. Sweat-soaked guests, empty stomachs, and royals insulted by seating that felt like a bad lottery. Instead of a fairy tale, this was a reality check. Meghan and Harry weren't interested in following the rules. They were rewriting them.
He decided to leave the royal family and go his own way in the United States. And he's just behaving, I think, sometimes appallingly. Certainly some of the things he said about members of the royal family, certainly, and Camilla and Catherine and his brother. I think you just don't do that with families.
If you thought the chaos ended with bad food and seating, Arthur Edwards says the real tension came from Harry himself. Instead of smiling on what should have been the happiest day of his life, Harry spent much of the ceremony glaring at the press. Arthur revealed that Harry deliberately turned his face away from cameras, dodging every shot, as if punishing photographers for how Meghan had been criticized in the tabloids during their engagement. For a royal photographer, that's devastating. Arthur admitted not a single one of his photos from that day made it into the papers. Imagine covering the wedding of the century and leaving with nothing usable. That's not just unprofessional, it was personal. Harry's anger at the media was written all over his face. While past royal grooms smiled and waved, Harry acted like he was in a boxing match, ducking and dodging every lens. It sent a message: this wasn't about celebrating love. It was about settling scores. Arthur described the entire mood as hostile. Instead of being part of a once-in-a-lifetime moment, the press corps felt shut out, punished and humiliated. Harry turned what should have been a unifying day into another battlefield. And let's be real. How many grooms spend their wedding day fighting with the photographers? Most people worry about the cake or their vows, but Harry seemed more concerned about making sure no flattering images made it to print. That bitterness overshadowed the entire event, leaving even seasoned insiders shocked.
Most of that interview was left on the cutting room floor because it was so one-sided and it was so unfair. And I think about watching it now, and you know, the bit about Archie and the colour of his skin. And I knew they'd be seething. I knew the Queen would be seething. I knew that the Prince of Wales, Prince Charles, would be seething. It would be so unfair.
Arthur Edwards didn't mince words when he summed up Meghan and Harry's wedding. In his view, it wasn't really a wedding at all. It was a media strategy, a staged spectacle designed not for family or tradition, but for headlines and branding. To Arthur, every detail screamed Hollywood. The celebrity-packed guest list, the bizarre seating, the endless media focus, all of it pointed to one conclusion. This was less about love, and more about launching Meghan and Harry as a global brand. And the timing makes sense. Just months after the wedding, Meghan and Harry began stepping back from royal duties, plotting their exit to California. Arthur believes the wedding was the beginning of that plan, a carefully orchestrated stunt to secure their place in the spotlight even after they left the palace. Instead of a sacred royal tradition, it felt like a Hollywood red carpet event. Guests weren't there to witness vows. They were props in a production. Think about it. Arthur had covered Charles and Diana, William and Kate, even lesser royals like Edward and Sophie. All of those weddings, he says, felt genuine. Families united, traditions respected. But this one? It felt cold, scripted, and painfully obvious in its intentions. Meghan and Harry weren't building a marriage that day. They were building a brand. Even the atmosphere reflected that shift. While guests melted in the heat and grumbled about hunger, Meghan and Harry seemed unfazed, focused only on the spectacle. It was as if they were already in California, already living the Hollywood lifestyle, and Windsor Castle was just a stage set for their big debut. Arthur's blunt verdict says it all. This wasn't the wedding of the century. It was the first act in Meghan and Harry's media empire. A production dressed up as a fairy tale, but hollow when you strip away the cameras.
And it's one of the saddest things of all, Matt, of course, is that the children don't get to see their grandfather, either grandfather, you know, and that's really so awful, because they're not getting to meet their cousins and to know their cousins, and it's such a shame for them.
When he was over for the Invictus Games ceremony, he didn't want to stay in a royal residence that was offered to him by the king because he didn't feel he had enough protection there.
If the wedding itself was a disaster, the fallout was even worse. Arthur Edwards pointed out that the event marked a turning point. The moment Meghan and Harry began openly pulling away from the royal family. Instead of settling into royal life, their very first big move afterward was sitting down with Oprah for that now infamous interview. Arthur blasted it as one-sided, unfair, and designed to humiliate the family. He revealed that senior royals were furious, with the Queen, Charles, and William reportedly left seething over what was said. From that point on, Meghan and Harry doubled down. They limited royal family contact, kept their children away from cousins and grandparents, and insisted it was all about privacy. But Arthur wasn't buying it. To him, the wedding was proof that privacy was never the goal. Media control every step they took afterward, from Netflix deals to tell-all books, seemed like an extension of that strategy. Even Harry's personal choices showed the shift. When he returned to the UK for the Invictus Games, the king reportedly offered him a stay at a royal residence with full protection. Harry turned it down, claiming it wasn't safe enough. Arthur dismissed that excuse, pointing out that royal residences are among the most secure in the world. Instead, Harry chose a luxury hotel with his own security detail. To Arthur, this wasn't about safety, it was about distance. It was Harry's way of saying, I don't need the family. I don't want the family, and I'll do it on my terms. Arthur's final verdict is brutal. What the world saw as a fairy tale, he saw as the worst royal wedding ever staged. A soulless, uncomfortable, disrespectful event that launched Meghan and Harry not into a happy marriage, but into a carefully scripted media empire.
Excuse, I think he wanted to stay in a hotel, and he was determined to do that. And don't forget, he travels with a small retinue of bodyguards as well, and suspect that was the reason why he did it. He had his own protection, and he felt that was enough.
So here's the big question. Was Meghan and Harry's wedding really about love, or was it the start of their PR empire? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm curious if you saw the same red flags Arthur did. And hey, at least the guests got finger food, even if it was the size of a fingernail. In our next video, we'll dive into how the Oprah interview secretly backfired and left Meghan scrambling for damage control. Don't miss it.